Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
This is KRWG Public Media, TV, radio, online. News that matters. Now, across the Mesilla Valley and the borderland, the stories that shape our community. From the KRWG Broadcast Center at New Mexico State University, this is Newsmakers.
Thank you for joining us on this special edition of Newsmakers. I'm Fred Martino. Election 2020 was a very good night for Joe Biden. After 3 attempts, he is president-elect. And while achieving that goal, he amassed more votes than anyone in history. But for other Democrats, it was a difficult night, including my guest, outgoing 2nd District Congresswoman Xochitl Torres Small. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Fred.
Good to have you here. I want to start with the presidential election and your reaction to Joe Biden now as president-elect and the significance of this election. It was really unusual on so many levels.
You know, there's a whole lot of work we need to do. As we continue to try to defeat COVID-19, it's going to be crucial that, of course, the election results are respected. That's a fundamental piece of our democracy. I lost, and I respect those results, and I think it's crucial that anyone putting themselves out for elected office respect the results of our democracy. And so now there is a lot of work that needs to be done, and even in these next 2 months, even before President Biden-elect is sworn in, we're going to have so much work to do because right now, before January 20th, there are people who have lost their jobs. There are miners in Grant County who have lost their jobs and are now on the brink of losing their health care. We've got people in southeastern New Mexico, because of the decreased cost of oil, have lost their jobs. And there are family members and healthcare workers all across New Mexico who are struggling with COVID-19, who are seeing their relatives die because of this virus. And so in these next 2 months, it is going to be vital that we put together a COVID-19 package to support those folks going through these incredible challenges. And then once the Biden administration begins, there's going to be far more work to do to make sure that a vaccine is distributed, reaches people in their most vulnerable situations, reaches people even in rural areas. And so it's going to be crucial that we all identify that we've had an election, elections have results, and now we've got to work together.
Of course, President Trump is not accepting the results of the election. What do you make of that?
Well, like I said, that's part of what it means to be a republic, a representative democracy. And all of us have to accept the results of elections and move forward as Americans together.
Okay. You mentioned the COVID-19 relief, and since you mentioned it right now, we might as well talk about that briefly. As you know, House Speaker Pelosi came up with another plan that was pared down because Republicans in the Senate would not accept the original plan that was passed, said it was too expensive. But it doesn't look like the pared down plan is going to be accepted either. Mitch McConnell says we don't need a plan that big. What do you think needs to be done, and do you have any hope that anything can be done before the end of the year?
I do. And I think the effort to pare down is crucial because both of those proposals were not able to achieve any bipartisan support, but there is opportunity for bipartisan support. I was part of the problem solvers, which is 25 Democrats, 25 Republicans, who put together a package that identifies the incredible common ground that we have, including investments in state, local, and tribal funds. As we know with the CARES Act package, local communities all across New Mexico were left out of immediate recovery. The only funds that went directly to a local community was to Albuquerque and Bernalillo County because of their population size. And so we've got to make sure we're getting money directly to those smaller governments, to places like Sunland Park, to places like Hobbs, to places like Grants and Milan. all across New Mexico and all across the country. And we've also got to make sure we're getting more money directly to Native American sovereign governments that right now are struggling incredibly with the challenges of COVID-19. Other areas of agreement that we have is making sure that we are supporting our robust agricultural economy. We've seen, I think in a way that a lot of people hadn't seen before, how crucial our supply chain for food is in the midst of COVID-19. And so being able to continue to support our dairy farmers, continue to support getting those crops to market, some of the challenges that our chili farmers faced with labor recently, finding innovative ways to have their backs in the midst of COVID-19 is crucial. And that's why the Problem Solvers package included $25 billion in support for our ag economy. Another area of agreement is another wave of Paycheck Protection Program loans and quick relief for the loans that were already provided. Because you have small business owners all across New Mexico who really are the lifeblood of our main streets that are struggling because they're trying to continue to pay their employees when they have to shift to find new ways to reach their customers. And this really hit home to me. I was talking with the owner of a local distillery in Las Cruces, who's been incredibly innovative, working with NM-2 to provide new products, working with Burrell Osteopathic Medicine to create hand sanitizer. So he's doing all he can, but he's worried about what next innovative steps he can take because he's got a big loan on his back, the Paycheck Protection loan that hasn't been forgiven yet. So we've got to forgive those loans so that those businesses can take those next steps to survive COVID-19, keep their doors open, and continue to employ their workers. So that's another area of compromise that we were able to reach through the Problem Solvers proposal. And then the last one is continued robust investments in supporting our healthcare infrastructure. That's getting tests all across the country. So it's not just in Albuquerque and Las Cruces, but no matter where in rural communities you are, you can get the COVID-19 test, and being ready for dissemination of a vaccine. Because we've got some great news about the vaccine. Pfizer has developed, I think, something that has a very strong and a very effective rate, but it has to be distributed with super cold storage. And that creates a new challenge when it comes to reaching rural communities. And that's why we've got to make sure in the next COVID package that we're investing more support for healthcare and healthcare in rural places.
Okay, well, we will certainly be watching and wish you luck as you continue to work for the next couple of months on hopefully coming to some kind of compromise that can be put up for a vote in the U.S. Senate. I want to move to your campaign. Based on Albuquerque Journal polls, we thought that the race was really close, but as it turned out, your opponent, Yvette Herrell, had a win of about 8 points. How do you assess the results and how they happened, how this turned out this way?
You know, that's part of the beauty of a democracy, of a republic where you elect people to do this work. It's been an honor to get to do this job, and I'm grateful to be here in my official capacity talking about the continued job that I have to do for the next 2 months to make sure that we are continuing to move forward as part of our elections. And, I'm proud of the job I've done. I'm incredibly grateful for and proud of the team that I've built, who's worked hard to build connections all across the district. And no matter what the results were, I'm proud of the people that we were able to deliver for. I'm proud of the lasting impact that we've seen, whether it's wilderness included in the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument, whether it is making White Sands National Monument White Sands National Park, and in the midst of that, also strengthening the mission of White Sands Missile Range through the last year's National Defense Authorization Act, or whether it's something as simple as allowing doctors in grants to reach their patients by telephone in the midst of COVID-19 and get reimbursed so they can keep their clinic doors open. I'm proud of the work I've been able to do and grateful for the opportunity to have done it.
Of course, as you very well know, the work that you've done is part of the issue in terms of running for office. The other part is the actual campaign and how you communicate the message of the work that you've done. Looking at the results, and of course you may have access to internal polling and information that we don't, is there anything that you saw that you would do differently?
You know, what I know about our nation and our system of government is that decisions get made by the people who show up. And I was so proud to get to show up for my home for 2 years and do absolutely everything I could to show up in communities that did not expect to see me. To show up and have surprising conversations with people about the work that we could do together. And I also know that our democracy gets decided by the people who show up to vote. And no matter what polls are out there or what other information you may have, at the end of the day, it's about turnout. And we saw that this year in terms of who showed up to vote, and we will continue to see that for elections all across our future, is that the decisions will be made by the people who decide to show up.
Yeah. You know, I'm sure you've seen the many stories about other races around the country where Democrats were not reelected, and some have blamed progressive policies for this, the Green New Deal and policing reform, chief among them. Certainly ads that were placed in some cases by political action committees that were against your candidacy tried to associate you with environmental policies that you actually did not support. Do you think that that was a major impact?
You know, I'm not interested in a political blame game. I am grateful that I got to do this job, and I do want to make sure that as we take on challenges like climate change, which is an existential crisis, which will impact not future generations, but farmers and people in forests with the fear of forest fire right now, that we also find ways to include everyone in building the solution. And there are clear opportunities to do that. Things like the Use It Act, which invests in research for carbon capture sequestration, which will have to be part of our solution when we combat climate change. Finding ways to support innovative solutions for capturing methane and making sure that we are using all of the methane that's being produced rather than letting it escape into the atmosphere or flaring it. We also can work with the oil and gas industry when it comes to use of produced water, recycling produced water to help address some of the challenges with water scarcity. And in the midst of that, and as we continue to build our robust energy economy, we should also be investing in solar and wind and making sure that we're investing in the transmission that's necessary to get that new energy to a market, which is currently one of the challenges that we face when we can continue to make New Mexico to diversify its energy portfolio. So there are great opportunities to address climate change and to make sure everyone has a seat at that table rather than fighting each other and allowing that pendulum to swing back and forth, which I think would be the most deadly thing when it comes to confronting climate change.
I'm glad you talked about
an open mind. We've got to make sure that we aren't demonizing people, and we've got to make sure that we are supporting innovative solutions.
Yeah, I'm glad you talked about climate change because certainly, as you're well aware, polls indicate that even in states that may be heavily voting for Republicans, there's a wide acceptance now that climate change is a serious issue, that it's human caused, and something needs to be done about it. But what I thought was so interesting about this election, and I want to hear from you about this, especially since you have a few more months in office, where you could make an impact on things. Beyond polls, which we have lots of polls on climate change and other issues, on Election Day, we really got an amazing sense of the electorate all around the country, including in states that vote heavily Republican, that there is enormous acceptance of progressive politics. We have Marijuana legalization in South Dakota, Montana, Arizona. Voters voting for this, saying, hey, we want this. We want to legalize marijuana. In Florida, where, as you know, President Trump won, voters by a much larger margin than they voted for President Trump voted for a $15 an hour minimum wage. And all over the country, in cities all over the country, there were votes for police reform. So there are a lot of issues where when Congress doesn't take action, if people have a chance to vote on the issue, they vote for a progressive policy solution. And another one, as you're aware, is expanding Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act. Missouri did that this year. Other states have done that through voter initiatives because the state legislatures didn't do it. And Congress, when that law was written, didn't mandate it, gave states the chance to make the decision. Looking at that, do you think our representatives in Congress and the Democratic Party need to be very strong in looking at the actual voter results, that progressive policy positions are widely accepted?
You know, one of the things I've learned serving New Mexico's 2nd Congressional District is that New Mexicans have an independent streak a mile wide, and they don't want to be tied with one label or another. They care about what's best for their families and for their future. And that's why when you look at a policy, as soon as you slap a label on it, the harder it is to reach agreement. And in Congress, we can only get things done when we're able to work with the House and the Senate and the President. And so instead of labeling one policy or another, identifying areas of common ground, whether that was, working on the George Floyd legislation and trying to make sure that we are promoting best practices when it comes to law enforcement. And with my background as, my grandfather being a Las Cruces police sergeant, making sure that we're getting law enforcement the resources and the tools that they need to be able to achieve that high standard to which we all hold them. When we do it without smacking labels on it, when we do it without using catchphrases, I think we're able to get more done.
Or maybe better labels. Well, I don't know how you feel about that, because certainly you raise a good point. That kind of reminds me of my question earlier about the campaign and the work that's done. Those are different things. I mean, a great example, another big issue in New Mexico is you often hear the term gun control, and that may be the wrong word. Gun safety legislation might be a better way to put it. Moving on, what's next for you, Representative Torres Small?
Well, I've got a busy 2 months ahead. We've got to make sure and fight for a COVID package that will support those minors in Silver City and the parents who are struggling right now to make sure that their kids are able to learn in a virtual environment. Working to make sure that we are investing in the healthcare that's going to get people through this crisis. And then working on appropriations. I was the first part of the first class to be sworn in under a government shutdown. And that's why it's going to be crucial that we pass appropriations. We had a deal before the election. That deal should stand. Because we've got to make sure our federal government is living up to its promises to continue to keep the lights on and pay the bills. So I'm going to be working hard to make sure that the appropriations deal gets figured out in the next 2 months. And lastly, the National Defense Authorization Act. That was how White Sands National Monument became a national park last year. And there's such important work. White Sands Missile Range, Holloman Air Force Base, some of the premium resources for our nation when it comes to our security, and investments all across. It includes a military service member pay raise. It includes all sorts of support that's crucial to keep our government going. And so the House passed it. It passed out of committee unanimously, both Republicans and Democrats. And so it's time that the Senate work with the House to get a bill and get it signed into law. So that's my focus for the next 2 months. And after that, I've never loved a job more. And I will always be looking for a way to serve my home. And I'm so grateful that I've been able to do it for the last 2 years.
Okay, so you're not sure after you leave Congress what you want to do next.
I'm focused at the job I have right now.
Yeah. You said you've never loved a job more. What do you love so much about it?
I loved that walking into a room, I knew I was never the expert. I was getting to hear from people all across the district who were living policies that we were trying to get passed every single day and who had the real expertise in terms of what we needed to do to get things done. I loved building strong, robust teams, both in New Mexico and in DC, people who cared about New Mexico, who knew it like the back of their hand, and every piece of legislation that came across my desk, every constituent services issue with the VA or with the Social Security got the same attention because it was about impacting the lives of New Mexicans. I loved getting to learn more every single day how to do a job better, and to bring other people with me. And so whatever's next, I hope I get to do something like that again.
Everyone knows politics is a tough business. Congress can be frustrating, can be difficult. Are there things that you won't miss next year?
You know, I won't miss the frustration of how long it takes to get things done. This COVID package, we have been spinning our wheels for months, and it is incredibly frustrating when I hear the pain that people experience on the ground because we haven't gotten to a solution, because we haven't been willing to work together.
Yeah, I know you also talk a lot about the great pressure that there is in office, and unfortunately it's not just in Congress, it's at the state and increasingly at the local level too, to raise money. And in Congress, the fact that you have elections every 2 years, some people say that's a real structural issue. You're always running for office and you're always having to raise money. What are your thoughts on this?
You know, in Congress, I voted for legislation to try to take on money in politics. I also personally committed not to take a dime of corporate PAC money, which I followed through for both campaigns, and am proud of that. And I do think that there is too much money in politics. We've got to find a way to address it. We've got to find a constitutional way to address it because of the challenges, recognizing that the connection between money and speech. But I think, you know, running 2 years means something. You know, this campaign, I was out talking to the people I serve, asking to keep this job. And I'm sad that I don't get to keep it. I don't get to keep doing the work for the community, the home that I love. But that's what our democracy is. And, you know, that means sometimes you win some, sometimes you lose some, but you're always trying. And everyone gets held accountable. And I'm okay with that.
Okay. You know, I have one more other question for you. You're an attorney, and a lot of concern has been raised recently about the Supreme Court since Republicans refused to allow President Obama to get a hearing on his nominee, but didn't do that with President Trump and appointed Amy Coney Barrett. It's really been called an unfair process, and President-elect Biden will have a commission to look at this. What do you think should be done in terms of the Supreme Court?
You know, I think that what I am focused on in my capacity as a representative that doesn't deal with the nominations of the Supreme Court is making sure that we are fighting for New Mexicans. So with a new configuration of Supreme Court, I am concerned about the impact on the Affordable Care Act, which is why Congress needs to find a way to strengthen that legislation, to make sure that people have access to quality health care that's affordable and that's close to home. So I think there's a lot of work that Congress can do to strengthen some of those things that I think all of us have recognized. In the midst of COVID, having health care coverage is crucial. And Congress needs to, in the 117th Congress, take that up to continue to strengthen the Affordable Care Act and to get rid of some of these insurance, the junk plans that don't cover pre-existing conditions. Because a whole lot more people now are going to have pre-existing conditions because of COVID-19.
So you don't want to address this.
From a congressional perspective, I think it's really important that we focus on these challenges in spite of the changing demographics of the Supreme Court.
So you don't want to address the Supreme Court, though?
I want to, as in my capacity as a representative, we've got to focus on the substantive issues. And so I think healthcare is a clear example of that could be under threat with this new configuration of the Supreme Court that Congress has a role in addressing.
Okay. Well, you mentioned the Affordable Care Act, so we have another minute to go. As you know, President-elect Biden wants to have a public option as part of the Affordable Care Act. Do you agree with that idea?
My focus in Congress has been to make sure that we can get quality health care close to home and that it's affordable. And that's why I voted many times, bipartisan votes, by the way, to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, to get rid of junk plans that do not cover pre-existing conditions but are allowed on the market right now and are driving the cost of health care coverage, making sure that Medicare has the ability to negotiate for lower drug prices, bipartisan vote in the House, and would have a dramatic impact on seniors who are trying to pay for their prescription drugs, would also have a dramatic impact on Americans across the country where prescription drugs cost too much, and would also help the federal government save money, which could then be put into things like cheaper plans for insurance by providing a subsidy, but also working to maybe give seniors hearing care or eye care or dental care as part of Medicare. So I think there's a lot that the Congress has already done that we should focus on right away to get done in the future.
But you don't want to take a position on the public option, though.
I think the first thing we should do is what's already done by the House, what's already been passed in a bipartisan manner to give Medicare the ability to negotiate for lower drug prices. That gives us more flexibility in the budget to identify options to continue to make affordable health care accessible close to home.
Well, good luck in your final couple of months in Congress, and we look forward to talking to you again in whatever that next role is in 2021. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Fred. It's good to talk with you again.
Good to talk with you, too. Thank you at home for joining us. That is our time for now. Join us this week on KRWG Radio. Every weekday, it's morning edition from 5 to 9, Fresh Air at 11, followed by Here and Now, noon to 2, and All Things Considered, 4 to 7. KRWG News is always online at krwg.org, and we'd love to hear from you. Email us with your story ideas and video submissions. The address is feedback@nmsu.edu. For all of us at KRWG News, I'm Fred Martino. Have a great week. We'll see you next time on Newsmakers.